Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Data Neighbor podcast. Today, we are actually interviewing Jean Tabach. Is that how you pronounce your last name?
Tabak.
Tabach. Okay, Jean Tabach. We have Jean here to talk to us today, and we're going to learn about his story. So, welcome to the show, Jean.
Thanks, appreciate that. Excited to be here.
Cool.
Hey, Jane, totally looking forward to this chat. I'm pretty excited. What do we have? Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Let's get into it.
Cool. So, just a very quick intro about Gene. Senior Director of Data Science at Instacart, and previously a head of Ecosystem Data Science at Facebook. So, very high pedigree in terms of what viewers are probably looking for in terms of, hey, I want to break into that. But before all of that, and we're going to dive into some of your experience in those positions as well. Before all of that, who was Jean Tabak?
Yeah, thanks thanks for the kind intro. I've never been described as having a high pedigree. I feel like a racehorse. Um, yeah, I guess I can start the story from the top. Well, I guess the middle of my life, the top of my professional career. So when I went to college, I got my degree in mechanical engineering. And I've always wanted to build race cars and spaceships and things that go really fast. And it didn't quite work out for me that way. I think what I realized in that degree is that a lot of mechanical engineering jobs are actually seem to me to be a little bit more boring. Things like air conditioning and construction and stuff like that. And I think people who are like really excited about the fundamentals probably find those things interesting, but I didn't. And so I decided to pivot even at that point, and I went to get a master's degree in engineering. I'm hoping that I can I actually did one in engineering management, hoping that I can kind of pivot more into solving business problems rather than solving engineering problems, which worked out for me pretty well. I went to Duke to get my master's, and then there are a lot of like local companies in the like Virginia, North Carolina area that recruited Duke, and I ended up getting a job at Capital One as a business analyst. And back then, this was 2012. The term data scientist didn't really exist, and so at Capital One, we had people. The job of a data scientist was basically split out across like four different functions, just as the job of was to a PM was split out across four functions. Like they didn't really have PMs either. Um, and so what I did, the business analyst job that I had there was pretty varied, but what I focused a lot on was things like modeling. And I think where I did some of my best work was, creating features, launching experiments, tinkering with our customer acquisition models and our credit line models. And I really liked the fundamentals of the job, but I guess this can be a bit of a trend. I found credit cards to be kind of boring, in that, I found it challenging to wake up every morning and go to work. And, one that I realized later in my life, it was really important for me to think about like the customer of the things I was building. And I was thinking of the customer of a credit card. It just wasn't really that exciting. It's like, why is my piece of plastic slightly better than other pieces of plastic? And I think when I knew I really had to switch jobs is when we were in meetings, kind of talking about like squeezing out these like final basis points out of a model. And they were like agonizing over this stuff. And I literally almost wanted to say, like, who cares? Like, let's just move on. And just even having that type of mentality, I was like, okay, I have to go somewhere else. I have to like go work on a product I'm excited about. At that point, and back in this was 2014. I think this was not quite as common as it is now. I think now everyone comes to California, and well, now everyone's remote, but comes to the California industry and wants to work in Silicon Valley and tech. It wasn't quite as common back then. I remember like my college career fair at Duke, which was like, legitimate school. Um, like when Google came there, it was like a big deal. It was like, whoa, Google hires people. That's crazy. That's like a search engine. Like Yahoo was there, and everyone was like, oh, Yahoo's still around. And like, yeah, it's still around. It's like a many, many $1 million company, many million revenue company, many $1 billion company, period. And so it just wasn't as common for like folks to, come out to the West Coast and like do the tech thing back then as it was even like 2 years later. But yeah, I did apply. I wanted to work on technologies that I was really excited about. So I applied to tons of jobs out here. And this is also, I think, a theme in a lot of people's careers. I got extremely lucky. And that, I had a bunch of interviews, a lot of jobs are like seemed fine. And I applied to Google for a job I was like way overqualified, way underqualified for, because I didn't know what the titles were, what the responsibilities were, or anything like that. And 6 months later, they called me back because they had my resume on file. And there's always this meme that like people say, like, we'll put your resume in file. They never look back at it later. And in this case, they actually have my resume in file and they called me back, which was awesome. I think I was actually at like it was either a wedding or a bachelor party or something. So like they picked a really great time to call me back, but it was fine. And then I ended up doing a good job on that interview, getting that job. And I didn't realize at the time because I wasn't really thinking about this kind of stuff back then, but it was effectively like a lateral move. Because I didn't really know anything about like Silicon Valley levels or anything like that. And I think a lot of folks these days are like thinking of like how like to move to like the next level at the company, or like, they don't want to move at the same level, or, God forbid, a lower level. I guess it was even demotion technically, because at Capital One, I did get a promotion to get to L4, and then at Google, my job was at an L3. And again, I wasn't really thinking about that because I was just like so excited to work at Google. And then I was there for about 2.5 years, or maybe 2 years or so. Happy to talk about that time as well. Those were like my formative analyst years. It was a good experience. I learned a ton at Google. Great working there. But I worked as the title was like marketing analyst, or like in the finance org or something like that. Basically, I worked on marketing campaigns that Google ran for its own services. And I tried to optimize them. And there were technical components of the role, but it was not like really a technical role. I felt like the technical stuff was kind of extra credit, and that there are a lot of times where, I was really excited about like running an experiment. And someone was like, oh, why are you running an experiment? Just like do some math, write down a number, and like we'll move on. And there were some times where I was like trying to do like a deep analysis, and someone was like, hey, like, can you approve my budget request? I'm like, I want to deal with your budget request. I'm doing analysis. And this caused a bunch of cross-functional tensions. But I realized there that it was necessary but not sufficient for me to work on cool products that I was passionate about. I also needed to like work on things within my role that I was also excited to work on day to day. And one of my best friends worked at Facebook, and they were starting this like new data scientist thing. This was kind of the first time I've really heard this term beyond like the very like research focused data scientists that have existed for a while.
When was this?
The Facebook thing, this was 2016. So at the beginning of 2016 is when Facebook took people who were called product analysts and they turned that into data scientists. So today there are no product analysts at Facebook, and there weren't back then either. They're all data scientists. People who were then like the hardcore data scientists, some of them they kept data scientists, some of them they turned into like research scientists, or a function they call core data science. I think their title is research scientist as well. Yeah, so I made that move. That worked out really well. I again was extremely lucky, and I landed into a team where my manager was fantastic and exactly the type of manager I needed at that point in my career. I landed into a role that, although I didn't know it at the time, really catered to strengths that I didn't know I had, and so it worked out really well. And I actually stuck in that same role for the full almost 6 years that I was there. So I started off as an L4 data scientist. I did get promotion with that move technically because I didn't get promoted to Google. And then I kind of grew into that role into like a tech lead manager of a small team. And then by the time I left, I was managing managers. I think some of them had managers, and it was a team of about like 25 folks. And the role transformed over that time, like under my feet, but I kind of sat in the same seat the whole time. I didn't like intentionally move anywhere else. And then, took a, I was in that role for a while. I think, for some old timers, like 6 years is not a long time to spend at Facebook, but I think in Silicon Valley, like people move every like 2 years, or at least they used to. So 6 years is a long time, especially to be in any one role, and just want to do something different. And for a bunch of reasons, which I can go into, I decided to take a role in Instacart, and I've been here for the last 2.5 years.
Nice.
So
That's very cool.
yeah,
There's
that
a
actually,
lot to unpack there.
yeah, there was a
Yeah,
lot. That was
exactly.
longer than I thought it was. Like, oh, it's gonna be a 1 minute thing. No, it took me like 15 minutes. Sorry about that.
I actually wanted to ask you questions after every 4 sentences of what you were speaking. But I was like, let me wait, and finally. but very exciting journey. I really loved it. Yeah.
Yeah, happy to dig into any piece of it.
So first thing, if I look at, so 2012 is when you had your first job, right? As a
It's when I graduated from my master's, and then I
graduate.
got the first job.
And
Yep.
you're 2024, 12 years, and you're a senior director. First, amazing, great journey. Just wanted to talk about that.
Thank you. A lot of luck along the way, as I said, but
No,
thank you. Yeah.
that's been a theme in all your answers. You've been talking about being lucky and luck. I really want us to maybe deep dive into that
Yeah.
too. So, what, uh, how much of this do you think is something that just came to you with random chance, right? Random, which is what we call luck. And
Yeah.
if you imagine you were not having the skill set or capability to grab that luck, do you think you would have gone further into that opportunity, whatever it was?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, luck is complicated. There's a professor I had in college who I didn't learn a lot from him because I wasn't very good at engineering. But I remember there's a phrase that he had that every person's born with a bag of lucky coins, and it kind of depends on like how you use those lucky coins. And I think, there's people out there who, get to senior director level in like 5 years or something like that. Like there's a lot of, and you hear all sorts of crazy stories across Silicon Valley, like these insane, fortunate things happening to people, right time, right place, etc. I think there's two components to it. There's like a before and there's an after. So I think there's one where you have to like really put yourself in a position to have fortunate things happen to you. And then when these things happen to you, you have to hold on for dear life and just go as hard as you can on them. And I think I wrote about this when I left Facebook. There's an analogy I use is like, if you're driving on the highway and it's like a crowd, it's here in California, it's every day driving on the highway and
Yeah.
it's jam packed. And suddenly something happens, like maybe maybe in front of you, like there's an exit or something, and like all the cars in front of you get out of the way. When that happens, you need to like step on the gas and go 100 miles an hour because you have just got an extremely lucky break in your traffic jam and you can go really fast and bypass a lot of cars. I think some people like that happens to them and they, in real life and in the analogy, they kind of like keep going at the same speed they were going. And this happened to me sometimes as a manager where there is times when someone's like working in an area, and maybe this is an unpopular thing to say, but like someone's working in an area and suddenly the area that they're working in becomes like a focus for the company. Like suddenly the CEO is like, okay, this is the thing that we're going to spend all of our time on. And that person doesn't change the way they operate. And I think that's like a huge miss because they got extremely lucky. The area they work on, they know the most about is like super high visibility. If I'm that person, and this is the unpopular thing, I'm working 12 hours a day. I'm working weekends because this is the time, right? Like over the course of 5 years, you can like take a month off if you want. But like now I got extremely lucky. My area is in high demand. I'm busting my ass to make the most of it. I'm getting that promotion this half. I'm getting a high rate next half, etc. Some people just kind of keep operating the way they're operating without realizing that they actually just got this windfall of really good things happening to them. And so I think there's like a component of like really taking advantage of it, but there's also a component of like setting yourself up for it. Like I've worked with people who, have been in the same role for like 5, 6 years. And if they're doing well, then that's great. Like keep doing it. But there are times when like things don't work out for them and they're miserable in that role and they don't even apply for other jobs. They don't look for anything else. And it's like no one's gonna come down from above and be like, hey, here's an amazing new job for you. Please come take it. You have to like put yourself out there and put yourself in the position to get these opportunities. So yeah, with like my Google example, like I got pretty lucky that they, called me back for an interview, but that's also because I like sent my resume to like 100 different places. Like
Also,
something
you
eventually.
cleared the interview, right, Jean? They got back to you and you were in a place that you cleared the interview to get
That's
hired.
true. Yeah. I mean, I studied for it, spent a lot of time, searching Glassdoor and all these other places to make sure I kind of knew the interview questions. And if it was today, I would actually probably, that one was so important. I think I actually probably would have gotten like an interview coach or something like that. I didn't know that existed back then. But yeah, I mean, I spent a lot of time working on it and I did put in the hard work to get there. But a lot of people put in hard work. Like interviews are so random. You can put in all the work you want and maybe one interviewer doesn't like one of your answers and suddenly you're out. So there's a lot of luck there as well.
I agree. So, okay. So, one thing I took away from it, which I really want everyone to take away from this, literally the luck part of you getting to where you got, It's because you set yourself up
Hmm.
for it, right?
Yeah.
And you were ready to pounce. Like you were literally wearing your running shoes and you were ready to jump onto this next loop, and you were consistently running to get to the
Yep.
next loop. So it was almost like building upon one another and another, right? So imagine if this came to another person who was not set up for success, or who are, like you said, were just going in their own pace of
Hmm.
whatever people in Capgemini love. Imagine a person loved looking at credit card data and just stay there. No, I'm kidding.
There are those people. They're still there.
I'm kidding.
I
It's
love
almost
credit
like
cards, guys. I love credit cards.
oh, see, we have one among us.
I like using them. I'll give you that.
So yeah, basically, that's I think something that I really, really want people to take away is that um, I agree, life's unlucky, and not every time you search for a job you get it. In fact, you like maybe there are tons of people right now in this bad market have been out there for 1 year searching for a job, and they're still interviewing or sending applications. But
Yeah.
putting yourself in keeping a perspective that hey, you are just setting yourself up for the success. The next time this one recruiter is going to reach out to you and this one hiring manager is going to talk to you, you're going to jump on it and you're going to finish it. So look at this
Yeah.
as that preparation, and maybe once they get the job they'll be in a place probably to get promoted within like 1 year too, right? But
Yeah.
if you kind of leave it to luck, I'm unlucky, and you're kind of dejected, then that's not going to be as fruitful when you get the call versus the other way around. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's really tough because this is a really rough market. I think this is the worst market I've ever seen for new grads. Even like 2012, I think was not amazing, but I think there were opportunities for new grads. These days, it's especially for data science because you have like a huge influx of new people coming in because it was such a hot field, and then some of the biggest hirers in the market for like L3 junior data scientists have either stopped hiring that group or are really like cutting back. So it's so tough. So I do acknowledge that. But there's, I guess, to kind of maybe pivot a bit. There's a few mistakes I've seen people making a lot. I think one of them is just having, I don't want to say like having a negative attitude necessarily, but there is like this attitude of like, hey, like, I've graduated from like a top school. I'm supposed to get a job. Like this really sucks. It's tough because I think if you kind of carry that attitude forward, it presents itself in the way that you apply to things, and it presents itself in the way that you like talk to recruiters, I'm sure. Like, I'm on like the subreddits and all the blind threads where people talk about this stuff. And you can kind of tell by just the vibe that people give off in these things that they're probably not showing up with their best selves in the recruiters. And so if they even send out like 100, 200 applications, even if they get one or two back, I wouldn't be surprised if they're like not coming into those discussions in a really positive way that makes that person want to hire them. And so it is like I acknowledge it is really, really tough. But I think yeah, one advice I would give to people is to like put yourself in a position to either take advantage of those fortunate opportunities or when those fortunate opportunities happen, like kind of I was almost like shed all of that baggage of like previous interviews you haven't done well in or whatever, and just really make sure put your best self, your best foot forward for that interview. I have a crazy tip that's always worked for me actually.
Nice.
I always play a hype up song for myself before an interview. So there's a
Nice.
specific song that it's gonna sound weird, but me and my roommate always used to like play it in college before like big exams. And it just kind of gets me in that mindset. So whenever an interview happens, I feel like I'm always kind of at my best self because I have my little song that I play beforehand.
Oh my God, I have a friend from Microsoft when I was there, or a colleague. So he used to go, especially before a presentation, go and just be like super confident, like I can do it. But he apparently shouts on top of his voice and to make sure
Yep.
there's room in the restroom. And like he'll come and he's like, I'm going to kill it. I'm going to kill this presentation. And I'm like,
Yes.
I was like, Nathan, are you sure you do this? Because I don't see you doing it. Like,
I love
yes, I
that.
do it. And I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. This is a great tip.
I was just gonna say like I've heard variations of that where people smile for an hour in front of the mirror before their interview so that they themselves kind of get that vibe of being optimists.
Ooh. Okay. This is good. We're getting like a whole like list of tips here. We should publish an
Yeah.
article. the best one I've heard, this was from, I forget who, like some TikTok influencer. It's like you should go into an interview, and I actually take this advice myself now. You should go into an interview, pretend like you have that job and you were just talking to a
Yeah.
coworker. And I think that is like the single best thing I've heard, because I feel like now when I go into interview, like there are people who I interviewed with Instacart who I like work with every day, and we just have conversations every day. And like those conversations are very normal and natural. And if I'm talking to a candidate and that candidate's like, like I don't want to say like trying to impress me, but if that candidate's like doing something weird in the interview, like not answering questions in like a reasonable way or going through like a weird logical path to get to answers, that even if they're qualified, it makes it hard for me to get that signal. But the best interviews I've delivered, the best interviews I've given were ones where the candidate was just like extremely conversational in a way that like I just felt like I was just talking to one of my reports or like a coworker, even if they didn't get the answer completely right, because like they don't know all of our internal data and all that stuff. So if they think logically and they kind of talk in that way, it's so effective. So that'd be my number one piece of advice.
That's
That's
actually a very good one. Yeah. One question, Jean, now out of this, because we are talking about beginners who are looking for jobs and how tough it is.
Mhm.
Let's say Jean graduated today, 2024. What would he do in this market?
5 steps
Man, it is.
how people can replicate your success.
Yeah, it's a brutal market. The first thing I would do is I would actually not. I think a lot of folks kind of come out of college and want to try to get jobs at these like big companies like Facebook, Netflix, etc. I would not do that. That's the first thing, because you can try. Effectively at this point, if you're coming out of college, it's like winning a lottery ticket, unless you have some sort of like inside connection, which I think at that point in their career, no one does. Or unless if you're graduating with like a PhD in some like crazy specialty, maybe. But if you're like a college grad from undergrad, even if it's like Stanford or Harvard or Berkeley or something, it's so tough because there's so many other grads from that area. I would actually, and I mean, even if your degree's in like data science, I would not even like necessarily look for that type of role. I would probably look for companies that are not quite as prestigious and roles that are not quite as prestigious. And so again, I started my job in Capital One as a business analyst. I mean, Capital One, I would argue, has like a decent reputation. So it's not like a, bottom of the barrel company or anything. But yeah, it's certainly like I would not put it like in the same tier as like Google. And, I wasn't like my title wasn't data scientist or anything like that. I was business analyst. And so if it were me, I would kind of end up doing that same thing, which is look for like more companies that I have some connection with, like locally or something like that, and look for a role that's analytical in nature, but maybe in a slightly different part of the business. The second thing I would do is the biggest mistake I see people making is just sending off like thousands of resumes, like hundreds a day. And if their metric of success, and I think in metrics of success, because that's what my job is, I guess. If their metric of success, their KPI is number of applications sent, that's a horrible KPI. Your actual KPI is number of job offers received. And if you go upstream of that, then optimizing for applications sent is actually a really bad idea. It's like if if I'm thinking of products, if like my KPI is someone making a grocery order, if the metric I'm optimizing for is people visiting Instacart, that's a useful metric to know, but it's a terrible metric, because if that's what I try to improve, I can do all sorts of janky things, and none of that stuff will ever lead to someone making an order.
So true. Yeah.
So I always encourage people to do like really thoughtful applications. Each application should take you like 2 hours or something like that. And I don't mean like the resume. I mean, so first you make a resume and like you make sure it's like a good resume. You can work with paid people to perfect it. Then I would slightly alter the resume to fit the job description. This is old hat. Everyone does this. I would actually then do the legwork, and this is where the 2 hours comes in, of finding the connections within that company to get your foot in the door. And the more popular the job you're applying to, the more legwork you have to do. Because I'll tell you, as a hiring manager, and I did write a post about this. When I post like a junior data scientist role, on LinkedIn, I get probably hundreds of messages on LinkedIn, and we get, I'd say in the low thousands of applications. And some of these we can weed out because they are, people with completely like irrelevant experience. But there's a lot of folks with like especially for junior candidates who haven't had the time in their career to set themselves apart, especially if you're coming out of college. Because if you're coming out of college, everyone looks exactly the same. It's like basically what school do you come from, maybe what GPA do you have, but like
Yep.
it's not that different. You have to really set yourself apart. And so I think like, I'm not saying you should do this. Please don't do this to me anymore. But there was like one person that emailed me. Is like, hey, I read your entire job description and I found a typo. And I'm like, wow, that's awesome. Like that's like a lot of
That's
attention to detail. They sent me an email. It was a typo. We fixed it. And yeah, I kind of like the initiative and the attention to detail. So that person's resume looked exactly the same as the other 1,000 people, but we ended up giving that person an interview because again, they looked exactly as good as everyone else. And so I don't
So
think
on
that's
that
the way to do
point,
it.
Dean, maybe
But
we could go into your
yeah.
3, 4, 5, but on that point, I have something to say. This is
Mhm.
what I tell people when I speak to them is, uh, when you're trying to get something from someone, this is in interviews, you want recruiter to call you, you want hiring manager to look at you. This could be anywhere else, like, you want to get promoted or you want,
Yep.
to your leadership to look at you and add you into the meetings and stuff like that. Think about what you are giving to them, right? You
Yes.
want something from them, think about what you can give to them. And when I tell this, they're like, hey, what do I have? I'm a student. I just started. I can't give anything. But I'm like, hey,
Yes.
think of the problems exactly what this person did to you, right? They found a typo. That's a added benefit to you and your
Yeah.
team, right? And what else could they do? They could probably look at Instacart and say things like, hey, in Instacart, I see this, and I'm not sure if you're looking at this data analytics problem. This is something you could look at, things like that. This would be an added benefit of some sort. So people looking at themselves as, what can I give? I am like too young or too junior to give. They don't think of themselves as they are customers for that app. They
Yeah.
themselves, like, you could think of things like that. And everyone's looking for a great review of how their product is. And this gets even more important when you're tackling with companies that are like startups, right? Who don't know anything, are who
Yes.
are actively looking out. Maybe not as much with Meta. Even with Meta, if you know which area this is, then you could actually talk. You're at least definitely going to be different than hundreds of other applicants who are just sending a message saying, I'm so and so and so and so. So think about what you can give them, is what. Yeah.
Yeah, I have that's a very great point. I actually have two responses to that. The first one is I think the value you can actually give to people, this kind of sounds silly, but a lot of value you can give to people if you're a college student is just like good vibes and like giving them a sense of self-satisfaction. Like a lot of people I think want to help. If you're like there's some people who just kind of sit and do their job and whatever, but there are some people who like really want to help their community. They know like they were a college student at one point. Like if someone reaches out to them with like a reasonable message, people feel good when they help. And so I think the thing you can offer that person is actually helping them feel good when they help you. Um, but the trick there is twofold is A, you need to find who those people are because not everyone will feel that way. That's what the 2 hours is for. And then you need to craft a message to them in a way that will actually get that feeling out of them. And I guess for me, I love helping people. But for me, one thing I see is a lot of people often message me like, hey, I saw your profile. I'm so impressed by your experience. Can we grab 30 minutes to chat? And I'm like, not really. Like, I don't really,
You love those,
I don't
no,
really
Gene?
have 30 minutes. Yeah. I mean, I don't have 30 minutes to chat with you. I wish I had unlimited time in the day. I would grab a call, but I don't. I've had better ones where it's like, hey, I watched this or maybe like this once this podcast comes out, I'm sure I'll get a lot of these. Like I watched this podcast of yours. I like this point you had. What do you think about this? And I feel like those are better because then I'm like, okay, I'm actually like you asked me an intriguing question. You actually listened to what I said, and now we can have a conversation. Like that's much more valuable. Again, this is where the 2 hours comes in. Like you need to do this legwork to find these people, do research on them. You need to set yourself apart from the other candidates. I'll say the second thing. There's and I don't know why this made me think of it in terms of like finding when you were talking about finding like bugs or using the product. There's a person, she's quite famous now. Her name is Jane Wong. What I saw her starting to do, this was when I first started Facebook. She would post these. You can look her up. I think she's like like famous. Everyone knows her now. She would post these these tweets, like finding bugs in Facebook's code and like looking at Facebook, like the code that we were pushing out. And she would like be like, oh, here's the stuff that they're going to release next week. I found it in the code. And like she became famous for doing this. And at some point, like Facebook's been trying to hire her for years. Like it's not like she wanted to apply for a role. Like they've been like, everyone at the company has been like, we should hire this person. I think recently she got a job there. I don't know if she's still there. But like that you can do stuff like that. And Facebook's hard because everyone's talking about Facebook. But yeah, if it's like a startup, like they have a forum, they probably have a subreddit. If you're like a member of that community and you're really excited about that area, like that, you can get involved in that way. Especially if you're like a really technical data scientist, there's so much open source stuff out there. Like if you become a key contributor of the open source community, it's so easy to kind of use that to get your way into a job. Like then you bypass like the LinkedIn searching and you just make those connections with the people actually working on the software.
That's so cool. So in my previous life, I actually worked at LinkedIn, and my job was actually the entire job seeker ecosystem and the sort of the data behind, for example, like how many people, per job, how many applicants, how many viewers, like all that kind of stuff is mind-boggling. And I think from the inside, and if any of our viewers is interested in a deep dive around this, I'm happy to do that in a future episode. Kind of like the insights from all those data analysis reveals the exact same thing that you just said, Gene. Like, hey, here's referrals is, forgot how many X, like 50X more effective than if you just blind apply. Reaching out to people is going to be 100X more useful than if you just do certain actions that's super passive. And so I think I like how you wrap them in stories and in personal experience. And I can attest, given that this is a data podcast, that the data.
Yeah, you've seen the data. Nice. Okay, I'm really glad to hear that. I'll keep. I was worried that you were going to tell me, well, I've looked at the data and you're wrong, which I hear enough at my day job that
No. It's I think that's good. Like, if when we use data to marry with a story, I think that's the most effective in getting the points across.
100%. 100%.
Cool. Awesome. So I wanted to dive into one point that you had, or I guess you were still going through your 3 to 5, but I'm hoping maybe like...
let's stop at 2. I feel like that we're going to get the most bang for the buck from those. I totally had another 3 that, was not going to make them up on the spot.
Nice. Okay, cool. Earlier you had said you discovered strengths that you didn't realize you had in your Facebook experience. Can you dive a little bit into what exactly those were and what helped you discover those?
Yeah, it's a great question. So in my first role at Facebook, this was a long time ago, and things were not. It was much more chaotic, and the org structure wasn't as neatly formed as it is today. I think today it's like at least when I left, it was like a very tight org structure. Like everyone knew exactly what they were working on. Back then it was more of like a cocoon phase where like a caterpillar is kind of like a blob of goo before it turns into a butterfly. And so everyone was like, a lot of people were trying to do lots of different things. And so when I jumped into this role, it wasn't like that explicit exactly what I should be working on. But one thing I ended up working on was this, every month we had this review on how the business was doing with our head of newsfeed at the time, like on product engineering, et cetera. Because like the newsfeed was basically like what the core Facebook app was at the time. And there was, I would like prep stuff for this review, like prep analyses. And we try to do these in a way that's not necessarily like, weather reporting, like, hey, here's how much we grew X, here's how much we grew Y. Okay, let's move on. But, and I think earlier you talked about data stories, but kind of like telling a story of like what's been happening over the past month using data. And so I would prep some of this stuff for the review, and there's another data scientist, a more senior one, who's delivering it. I think one of the times, and the review always went a little like mediocrely, I will say. Like there's, there are like a lot of like clarifying questions, and in retrospect now, I will say like it was not that well done. At the time, I didn't know better. And then the lead person who was kind of organizing it was out of the office one day, and so my manager kind of was like, "Hey, Gene, why don't you lead the review?" And so I did, and it ended up going really well because I guess I didn't realize that I was good at delivering these type of things. I didn't realize I was good at putting these kind of stories together, but it happened. And so, yeah, then my manager was like, told me afterwards, like, yeah, that went really well. You should just do this moving forward. And so I spent a lot of my time spending the month doing analyses, preparing for this review and doing that type of thing. And, this is really the first time I've done something of that nature. It ends up working out really well. I didn't know it was a thing I'd be good at. I guess like I probably learned things along the way that helped me get to that spot. But then, because goes back to the previous theme, once I realized like, hey, I'm good at this thing, I, again, stepped on the gas 120 miles an hour. I'm like, I'm going to absolutely crush the heck out of this thing. And there was like a lot of stuff I did in my role that kind of like helped improve this review, bring more color, bring more depth of analysis. I would like bring other teams in, stuff like that. And eventually this went from being just a thing that we did every month to a staple of like how we ran the Facebook business and, over many, many years. And from that, I was able to like build my influence with these leaders and then do a lot of other stuff that, a lot of other data scientists had trouble doing where, if they were embedded in smaller product teams, they would try to be like, oh, this is what we should do at like a company level. For me, I had an hour with these guys every month where I would be the person who told them how the business was doing. Oh, and by the way, here's an idea I had. Here's some other analysis I did on the side. Let's do this thing too. And so I think just like really figuring out that this thing worked and capitalizing on it ends up working out really well.
I really want to emphasize for people who are not aware of so you've been calling this thing, you are good at this thing, you are good at this review meeting. I want to let people know, especially who are not in big tech, like it's threaty. I remember one of those meetings when I was younger and just joined Microsoft when we had those review meetings can be very tough for people where you are showing up and there are people from multiple stakeholder teams sitting there and you're showing data and there's too many skills that are needed. You should be good at what you're showing, the data itself, the product should be good, and how you present it, right? In a way that's like a story, like how you're doing right now. It's totally evident how you might have done it back then, I guess.
Amazing.
So it is like having a good product and selling that data product in a wonderful story manner in a way that makes them trust the data and eventually trust you. And it's not generally an easy thing for people who have not used to it to get used to in these review meetings with like stakeholders from engineering, from product. That's what I assume that meeting was, right? Engineering, product design, all of them sitting together and trying to understand how the product's doing and what should we do based on how the metrics are performing.
Yep, you've been the same meeting I have. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
All of us in these meetings every single week now. Okay. So that's great. Just wanted people to know what this meeting's about. Yeah.
Yeah, and if I were to dissect, I think at the time, I think, you just kind of do these things organically. But if I were to like really dissect the things that made it effective, I think so. One, I think these are all really important skills for data scientists. I think one is being able to tell a story with data, not just like putting data up on slides and being like, here's a chart. And the thing I hate the most is like these like slides with like so much detail, like call outs and asterisks here, there, and everywhere. It's like, if you're talking with like if you're like an IC3 and you're talking with your IC3 PM and you're going over the details, that's fine. But if you're presenting to like a VP or something or other, like they don't care that the data is not accurate on September 30th. Like, don't even, like, it's not that, like, unless you think it's important, don't put it out there. Cause I think I think it's almost like when you present stuff to this level of people, you should almost do all of the chewing yourself and then give them like a chewed up product that they can just quickly ingest. I realize that's a horrible way to describe it. But I think a lot of folks like show all their work and it doesn't help. So like crisp, clean slides. The way I tell folks on my team to do this these days is your deck should be so clear that if you show it to a 7-year-old, they should be able to explain it to another 7-year-old. And if it's not at that level, then an executive won't like
you went to
understand
another level. I usually explain it to a kid, but you were like, the kid needs to be explained.
The kid needs to be able to, because what happened, I'll tell you why that's important. because you can explain it to, and I'm not going to call it, you can explain it to the executive, and they might sort of understand what you're saying, but then when they then hopefully take action based on your recommendations, they're going to go someone else, and they might explain it in a way it's actually different than what you intended. And this happened to me all the time. So you have to actually explain to them in a way that when they tell it to someone else, it'll be exactly the thing you said. Otherwise, a lot of misinformation gets passed around, and then it all comes back to you.
So true. I know. Who said you that? Who told you that? Who told you that? It's like,
Yep. We've all been there.
Yeah.
yes, yes. And one thing that's very interesting, it reminded me of my time at Microsoft when I was an intern. So I used to directly report to director of data science. For some reason, it didn't have a manager. So I was like an intern reporting director to director. And she was worried that it was my final intern presentation. She put like 2 hours on the calendar for us to finalize the presentation, right? And I'm like, I was worried, what is she going to have, say about this presentation? And I worked, I think, 2 days entirely. I had all the data because it was my internship. And I put it in 5 slides because I was told it's 10 minutes. So I thought, I mean, it was 15 minutes, I guess. And when I
Yeah.
showed it to her, she was like, did you do this yourself? And I'm like, yes. Because she was like, I expected a 50-page deck.
Yeah,
And
that's what I would have expected.
yeah, I put 2.5 hours, a 2 hour slot for you on a Friday afternoon to go through your deck and make it condensed. And I'm super surprised that you got it to me in 5 slides, and this is great. She just added like a thing here and
Amazing.
there, and we were done in 30 minutes. And she was like, this is the reason why I should give you a full-time offer. I'm right.
I probably would have had the same reaction, honestly. I would have expected a 50-slide deck, and then I probably would have just given you an offer if you gave me a 5-slide deck.
Yeah,
It's
and
really easy.
my other friends who are interns, they just copy pasted my deck, the template. So that was hilarious. I remember like two of them, they
That's
were like,
great.
"Oh my God." And we looked a little similar, but it's true. It was like a 15 turn presentation that we did. And yeah.
No, it's a consistent template. Extra point.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. What a story. There's one piece of advice I always give to my team is when you think you're done in terms of an email, in terms of, anything like presentation or any sort of artifacts, cut it down in half. Do that once. And then when they come back again, I would be like, cut that down in half again. And I don't care how you do it. Go figure out how to cut it down in half and still retains the thing that you're trying to say. And then usually, if you do it twice, you're probably in a pretty good spot.
Yeah.
That's actually a great tip. Yeah.
These days, honestly, I think a lot of the more junior folks have it a little bit easier because these days you can just use AI to do this,
Oh, yeah.
especially if it's in like a Google Doc or whatever.
Right.
I think this is the first podcast I've ever listened to where data podcast where AI wasn't discussed in the first 50 minutes. So I want to make sure we at least say the words, otherwise we won't get picked up by the algorithms. But yeah, I think it's I think like some of the AI hype is certainly overblown, but for things like polishing communications and making things shorter, it's so effective. My personal go-to is I use ChatGPT for this, and I Instacart for internal docs. So I have like an internal version of it, like many companies do. I feed it my favorite things that I've written. I just give it like a whole list of it. I'm like, this is the style you need to emulate. And then I give it like a new thing I've written. I'm like, make this shorter by half or polish it or whatever. And it's kind of shocking how well it's able to replicate the way that I speak in just by reading like many, many lines of my own emails. But it does it pretty well.
That's awesome. That's
The
awesome.
only thing that I see ChatGPT or, all these models, Claude, Perplexity, and a bunch of other things, do slightly does not have it today. Probably it will, with the new ChatGPT 4.0 and stuff. Is I think there's some the soul part of the summary misses,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
It's like the storytelling, how we've been talking today. So if you want to summarize it, it's going to definitely summarize it, definitely.
Yeah.
But the storytelling part, I try to work a lot with it. I'm trying to post on LinkedIn these days, and my thing
Oh, yeah.
has been trying to do some storytelling, and I work with it a lot to make sure that it helps me condense, but keeps the story intact, keeps the emotion intact, right? And that's
Yeah. Yeah.
something that you bring. It's almost like human element. So use AI and bring the humanness to it from your, put your soul into it a little bit here and there, in the middle, start and the end. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. It's paints such an artistic Visual. I
Yeah,
like it.
that's cool. Hey, here's an AI question for you, Gene. So, quote, AI is going to replace data scientists. Is this true?
Oh my God.
Oh,
This is going
I
to
mean,
start. So please make sure you have a very good, nice
oh,
answer.
yeah, I mean, definitely untrue. I think it will. I think it has already improved efficiency. I think it will continue to improve efficiency. I think honestly, like I guess I'm an optimist. I think it'll reduce the things that data scientists need to do but hate doing, and leave time for them to do things that are really value adding. I think of AI as having unlimited access to an intelligent college intern. And so it enables us to do things with, let's say, data collection that we previously couldn't do. Like if, let's say, I wanted to, I mean, I don't know how well this work at Meta with like billions and billions of pieces of data, but at Instacart, if I want to look at like 1 day's orders, I think we're not in the billions range yet. And so I could probably like have it like scan through them and like ask it basic questions. And I think it could just give that to me in the same way that like if I had 1,000 college interns, I'm like, for the next 8 hours, you guys are all manually looking through orders. So I think data collection is better. Coding is just easier with Copilot-esque tools. Just I think it'll take you half as long to code something. Even like statistical things, things that are like not developing new techniques or like connecting things that are very different, like setting up an experiment. I feel like an AI can probably just help you do that in a much shorter amount of time. And then you can spend your time on connecting different parts of the business, on taking these insights, interpreting them, which is really the biggest bang for the buck you have on data science, and spending more time like talking to people about the results rather than just kind of squirreled away in the corner. I think like deep technical data scientists, like if you're like at the staff level, like doing like the real groundbreaking research and experimentation, you probably still have to do it yourself. Like you might have a little bit of help. But I think for like a lot of the basic things, I think it'll just improve efficiency so much. I think the job will still be there. I think we'll just be able to extract more and more value. I know it's true at every company, but Instacart, like the data scientists are aggressively overworked. Like they have like for every one data scientist, I would say probably 1.5 to 1.8 worth of data scientists work to do. And so if we can kind of help one data scientist get 1.2 or 1.3 amount of work done with AI, then that still leaves more stuff to do. But it's not like, it's not like you like automate your way out of a job. You automate your way into doing bigger and better things.
Hi, what do you think? I wanted to ask you this question, but I can tell what I think about
Yeah.
AI.
Are you the pessimist?
No, I actually really agree with what you said. It's one quote that really resonate with me is that AI is not going to replace jobs. AI is going to replace or people who use AI is going to replace those who don't. And that's probably generally
Yeah.
applicable because you're going to be like a supercharged self doing whatever you're doing with the help of AI versus the ones who don't. They're essentially stuck in the past of, hey, I'm still trying
Yep.
to do these like very manual things, stuff that takes all the time, but is only 10% of the value. So, yeah, I mean, I am an
Yeah.
optimist. I think human ingenuity, creativity is not going to be replaced by AI, but it certainly would be helped fast tracked by a whole ton if we have them, if we actually use them in earnest.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's that different than, I mean, when I started my career, most analytical people I worked with, and I didn't work with like, deep research scientists, but most of them used, I would say, like Excel to do a lot of their work and SQL to do another part of their work. And over time, that transitioned into using Python, using R, and now almost every data scientist I know works in Python or R. And I think it's kind of like the same thing. Like if you're a data scientist who never learned Python or R in 2012 and you're still here today, like you are at a severe disadvantage to someone who can do a lot of these things at scale, unless you're amazing in some other way or something. So it's kind of like the same thing. I think like it's just another tool that you need to use that makes your work more efficient.
To that point, I think AI is just, to your point, another tool that people just need to get really good at. Some people are resistant to it. And if you're one of the people that are resistant to new technologies or anything brand new, that's not a good place to be. Just be open-minded. Make sure you're always equipped with the latest, not like the latest cutting edge stuff, but hey, here's a really good thing that you should do. Don't fall behind just because you don't feel like it or whatever. That should be part of your toolkits. Go ahead, Shravya.
Yeah, 1000%.
I'll say something fast and I have a question for both of you guys and maybe an answer myself too. So, what I'd like to say in the same theme is that I think data science could be a support system and also a partner. You could just be supporting, and most of the support work is, to be honest, mechanical. And as a partner, you basically get to be like the thought leader and, be the person that is behind the roadmaps and what needs to be done by the engineering and product and be there on the team. So if you're more of a support system, I would say the chances are higher to just be a tool that gets replaced by another tool that's built by AI, maybe like product analytics tools that are getting built these days. But you are being a thought partner where you're coming up with your own ideas and the intuition behind it, the creativity behind it, like Kai suggested, then there is obviously a tool can't replace you. So that's what I wanted to say. Now, I have a question actually to both of you, or maybe Jean, let's start with you. How do you think AI needs to be used today by data scientists? I know Python coding, I can definitely think about that. What other areas do you think?
I mean, I think there's the obvious ones like using it for like Copilot. I think using it, maybe less obvious, but using it in a conversational way to talk through experimentation problems, I found to be pretty useful. I guess I use it in two ways that are maybe a little bit less conventional. One is I always use it to like explain things to me. I spend a lot of my time in marketing and I don't have a background in marketing. And so there's a lot of like, if you've spent 15 years in marketing, there's just a lot of like things that are very intuitive to you and a lot of things that make sense. And I always just have conversations with ChatGPT about them. Like, hey, why is this channel run this way? And we'll talk about, ask it questions. So I think it's actually a lot of these things it knows really well. I think if you get really deep into things that are specific to your company or very specific questions, it's not as good at those general things as like, hey, why is the effectiveness of television advertising measured in this way? Like it'll tell you and you can have that conversation. The other way I use it, I think I alluded to this earlier. I really think everyone should use it this way, especially folks who maybe are not like native English speakers. I give it things that I write, and I tell it to polish it, or I tell it to make things concise, or up level it for executives, or down level it. And you need to do. There's a lot of, I think, you were alluding to this earlier, there's a lot of like manual work you need to do afterwards. But I think the communication is such an important part of being a data scientist. Like your analysis can be great, but if you can't get that point across to people, it really falls flat. And this is such a great tool for helping you do that. Like previously, when I worked at other companies, like there are, people who I partner with sometimes who, like they would help me with like things they were really good at, like coding or ML. I would help them polish up their written documents. You don't even need to do that anymore. You can just ask ChatGPT or whatever AI tool of your choice to do both. So yeah, I think for that's the way I would use it. But I think a lot of people kind of stick with the like the co-piloting coding thing and just kind of like leave it at that. But I actually think of it as, what's the thing, like the rubber ducky that like it's like, hey, talk to like this rubber ducky that's on your desk and explain a concept to it. You should do that with ChatGPT because it'll just respond to you. It's even better than a rubber ducky.
I love it. Love it. Yeah, I think it's good. Hi, how do you use it? Do you use it for any of the planning stuff? You've been traveling around the world, right?
Yeah, I use it in quite a lot of ways. One is pretty consistent with Gene, learning new skills. Like literally just ask it stuff, ask it to teach you, ask it for examples, and then repeat certain things back to it to see if your understanding is correct. Very helpful, even more useful than YouTube videos because you don't have to sit through a whole bunch of ads or anything like that. The other way, and this would
Yes.
actually be useful for our viewers as well, is sorry, something just happened here. Like a noise just went on, and now I completely forgot my train of thought. This is awkward.
That's okay. We should also talk about how AI should not be used, probably. For me, every time in Slack, when I see someone's message, I can definitely identify if it's a message that ChatGPT helped them versus they came. with it themselves. Like it's like so evident. So one way to not use AI
That's
is
awesome.
try to have a prompt that helps you make it not so evident, guys. Like really, it's really evident. So that's what I want to tell folks. It could be a LinkedIn post, it could be a Slack message, it could be a
I
document, wherever it is, right? Because so I that's how you not to use AI for writing for sure.
I see the LinkedIn posts. This is this is gonna sound silly. I found this to be like personally annoying because there have been several times since ChatGPT was invented that I wrote something myself and I would post it, and my manager would text me like, "Oh, did you use AI to help you with this?" I'm like, no, I wrote this myself. This is just how I talk.
Oh man, that's
So
cool. Love it.
yeah, watch out for that.
Love it,
That's
love it.
hilarious.
Okay, I remember my second point. My second point was ask ChatGPT to explain business problems to you. Like if certain things are not intuitive,
Oh.
if a certain business domain you don't know how it works. For example, I don't know how credit card industry works. I don't know how they make money. And that is massively helpful for me if I were to interview at Capital One to get a job because I do need that knowledge. Ask it to give you a short summary. Ask it to give you a download. Ask it to help you prep for possible questions in that domain too. I think that's going to be really helpful, and that's what I leverage it a lot as well. I didn't do that for this meeting, so Gene, these are all original questions.
Amazing, and these are all original answers.
This is not like a gene clone or something.
Nope, not this time.
Not this time. I like that answer.
Yeah. I've used that for interviews myself as well. And the one thing I will caution is to be I think it does really well for the technical parts. For the behavioral answers, it really does not give you good responses. They're like extremely like canned and unhelpful. So like tell me about a time you've like had conflict or whatever. I think you
Yeah.
still have to think of that yourself.
Yeah.
So many. It's still far from being human. That's what it says, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm talking about, the emotional part, the storytelling part, everything. So any area of work that needs to be human, I think please stop using AI for that. Like behavioral questions, it's all about
That's a
it's a
great
human
rule of thumb.
element, right? Technical, it's like it's generally numbers and data and here and there. It doesn't matter if it's you versus the other. So yeah.
Absolutely.
That's cool. So Gene, we do want to be respectful of your time. It's been an awesome conversation, and I think our viewers are gonna take away a lot of golden nuggets from the show. And
I
if you
can't
want,
wait to see how many Instacart bugs I get emailed about and how many people start digging into our source code and telling me about our next feature.
I hope
I
you
think,
get many, many emails, Jin, because that tells that this podcast, people are watching it and this will be a hit. So I hope you get many of those emails.
Not just watching, but getting like 40 minutes in as well, which is a great mark of engagement.
That's true.
Yeah,
absolutely.
perfect.
I think there's a really good nuggets from this. Absolutely, for sure. So, well, Gene, hopefully you get a lot of pings and messages, and that would be a very much a dual benefit for both this podcast and just in general people finding value out of the things that you've said.
Yeah, I hope so too. We'll see.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And
Cool.
for viewers, if you like this video and if you found value, please like, subscribe, and share the content. And we'll see you next time.
And if you want us to get Gene back, have the questions down for Gene, and we'll try to get him again the next time to answer those questions.
Can't wait. Maybe I'll send the AI version next time.
Awesome.
Cool. All right. Talk to you guys later.
So much. Thanks so much for your time.
This is
We'll catch you later.